Hello, welcome everyone. We're about to begin this session on powering Europe Gulf green energy cooperation. Thank you all for joining us. We know that there is a lot happening, but we thought this would be a very important moment to reflect also on what's going on next door at COP28 in Dubai. And a lot is going on. I'm Dr. Cinzia Bianco. I'm a research fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. We have been working on cooperation on energy climate issues between Europe and the Gulf for a few years, and we have intensified our work, obviously, this year leading up to COP. And yeah, I think, having followed the issue, there is some good news that we can also share with you today. Some still obstacles and challenging, but basically, there's a lot happening that it's worth discussing. And I have a really stellar panel with me to do that. I wish to thank you very much for agreeing to join this panel today and taking time out of your own very busy schedules. His Excellency Salem Al Ofi, the Minister for Energy and Minerals of the Sultanate of Oman. Thank you so much for joining. His Excellency Luigi Di Maio, the European Union's Special Representative for the Gulf region. Thanks a lot for joining us as well. And Dr. Alif Chalik, the CEO of Women in Smart Energy, working out of the United Kingdom. Thanks for your time. So we will do this in a very snappy, I think, way. We will try to cover a lot of ground. So we'll do our best to also leave time for some questions from the audience. But I wish to start with a specific question on a very interesting area that is core to the energy relations between Europe and the Gulf. So we obviously have seen Europeans turn to Gulf monarchies, um, especially after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, in search of guarantees on energy security. We have seen an unprecedented turn away from Russia and a rebuild of this energy security for Europeans, with also some important cooperation and contribution from different Gulf countries. But at the same time, especially the European Union, but also individual governments, has tried to make it this new cooperation also looking towards the future and not just on fossil fuels, which are necessary for today's economy, but really trying to concretely put the base to accelerate a transition to green energy and create some strategic relations to go towards that goal together. And in that framework, in that context, I think the Sultanate of Oman is playing a ever growing role and a more important role. And I wish to ask for His Excellency's Minister Alaufi's assessment on what do you see happening between Europe and the Sultanate of Oman, specifically on green energy.
Well, okay, thank you very much, and good morning to you all, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. Probably before I talk about the relationship, let's talk about what we can offer. And since late last year, we announced globally that Oman is positioning itself to become a global hub when it comes to hydrogen, green hydrogen specifically, both for local consumption, but the majority of it will be for international consumption in one form or another. We have established since, through a royal decree, the allotment of over 50,000 square kilometer dedicated primarily for the production of green hydrogen through renewable energy from solar as well as wind. We think the area is extremely competitive. It's probably one of the top 4 or 5 locations globally that can offer the lowest possible cost of hydrogen. We have already started a very transparent and open auction system last year. 2 areas have been signed as a result of that auction process. 3 additional locations were also signed. These are legacy that we have been in discussion with them prior to the establishment of the framework. We honored that discussion and we signed 3 agreements. So 5 in total were signed that potentially give us almost 50% to 60% of the target we set for 2030, which is a million tons of hydrogen that can be produced in Oman. As we speak, we are conducting the second round of the auction process. We're almost done with the qualification, and we're getting into the negotiation process, which hopefully take us to a successful signing by April of next year of the remaining 2 or 3 that will get us to the million ton target by 2030. And of course, we believe we can probably get anywhere between 1 to 1.5 million ton. Our ultimate target, of course, is much bigger than that. We believe if all the land I've just talked about is consumed in renewable energy production and hydrogen, then we could be potentially producing anywhere between 25 to 30 million tons of hydrogen, which is extremely sizable even by world demand. To support that, of course, we also immediately started an extremely important requirement, which is the infrastructure to support all of this, because ultimately it has to be certified, and therefore we put everything into a sort of island mode, whereby no contamination from existing systems will be affecting the green hydrogen production, whether it's the production of the hydrogen, the production of the water that will be used, the power that will be consumed to either convert the hydrogen into a transportable derivative, or as we signed 3-4 days ago at COP, the potential liquefaction of the hydrogen and ultimately exporting that in a liquid form, which is very challenging because it's sort of minus 260 degrees, so it's pretty different sort of scale altogether. So that's really just a quick introduction. Now, in terms of what we are planning to do with European nations, we identified, of course, the critical ones for us at this moment in time, and we've been in discussion with them for quite some time. Belgium, of course, through the port of Antwerp, have been the starting sort of discussion point. I've been there a few times. Recently, we've signed an agreement to certify one of the existing projects so that we get the full understanding of what a certification that meets the European requirement look like. That project is ongoing. We expect to finish it hopefully in the first quarter of next year. And of course, we are expanding that to see, okay, what does certification of other projects look like so that we can learn from it and incorporate it immediately. We understand not all the certifications are the same, but by far the European seems to be the most stringent. So if we meet that, then we are in a comfortable position to meet the Eastern requirement as well. The Netherlands, of course, is an important hub because of Port of Rotterdam and Port of Amsterdam. Port of Amsterdam was very clear that they can only welcome green hydrogen in a liquid form, which means we have to start working to satisfy that requirement, and hence the agreement that we've just signed with Port of Amsterdam, as well as other companies from the port itself. The last stop for me was also Luxembourg, which is, of course, a financial hub for Europe, but it's also a locked state, so that we also need to understand what does it mean to serve a locked state. And the last one was only 2 weeks ago in Vienna, also trying to understand how we can serve the Austrian market, because Austria is not connected to any ports, and therefore we need to start working with other ports in the region, either from the Italian side or the European side, the sort of Netherlands or the Belgian side. The biggest market in Europe, and I'm not trying to underplay anybody, is by far the German market. And therefore, of course, we're working with all the German sort of industry to try and see how we can transport the hydrogen ultimately to the German market, particularly the western side of the German industry. And with that, of course, we're working with companies like Flaxi, like Khasuni, and so on, in order to establish the infrastructure. And in fact, Flaxi is already partnering with one of our companies.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very comprehensive overview. And indeed, Germany is one of our member states that is sort of trying to accelerate and also already has some pilot project implementing the use of hydrogen for heavy industry. in particular the industries that are most difficult to decarbonize. But you have raised a number of points, and there is, of course, many. This is quite a significant shift and transition that we're trying to do together, both Europe and in the Gulf and broader region. So there are obviously many things that we could touch on. You mentioned hydrogen in a liquid form, in the form of ammonia, for example, or in other liquid shapes, and that opens up, for example, questions about the maritime safety, because you have to have a safe environment to transport what is a very sensitive product that is poses some challenges of its own. So that there are a number of questions also in terms of industrial cooperation, as you mentioned, certification. You already raised this issue, and at the level of the European Union, there has been some work to produce quite stringent standards, as you already mentioned. Then the creation of a single energy market in the European Union is also a very important dossier on the table, because, as you mentioned, to serve some of the countries that are landlocked, like Austria, ultimately you would need to strengthen the existing energy infrastructure connecting all of the EU countries, or most of the EU countries. And that is also something that the EU is working on. So basically, we have many angles to cover this. So I guess the best thing I could do to His Excellency Di Maio is, can I ask you for a reaction to what you heard from the minister, and how do you see this sort of cooperation going?
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Thank you very much for the invitation of the European Council on Foreign Relations, and it's a great pleasure to have in front of me this audience, and to see again the very good friend, Minister of Energy and Minerals of Oman, Salim, because we met a few months ago during my first trip in the region. As you said, I am the EU Special Representative for the Gulf region, and the appointment of a EU Special Representative for this region, in particular for the relations with the GCC countries, it's a part of a more comprehensive strategy of the European Union for the region that dates back to May 2022. When I was still Minister of Foreign Affairs of Italy, we approved the new strategy because many months before, so before the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the European Union started a new process in order to focus more the attention on this region and on the strategic partnership with the countries of the GCC. Probably the mistake and the undervaluation of the past was to consider the countries of the GCC only reliable partners about the old kind of energy supplies. But the countries of the region, like the European Union, are investing, both regions are investing a lot in diversification of their economies, and so in renewables, in new energies. My mandate has, in general, 5 pillars: trade, energy, regional security, people to people, and relations between the institutions. The second one, energy, in particular, is focused on renewables, and there are many kind of projects that we are going to develop according to our programs like Repower EU, European Green Deal, Next Generation EU. And there are many points that are similar to their programs, the vision programs of the countries of the GCC. And I have to say that when we met in Oman, and Commissioner Simpson recently visited Oman for the Hydrogen Week, we are understanding more and more that with Oman, we are able to deal more about hydrogen, because they are in a very advanced point about technologies and even about the supplies, because you are already signing contracts in view of the supplies of the future. I would like to underline that I'm coming from COP28. COP28 obviously is one of our common challenges, and the European Union made these two proposals for the energy pledge, that is the global energy pledge and the global methane pledge, that are two initiatives of the European Union that were a success because more than 130 countries joined these two initiatives that are in line with the Paris Agreement and the idea to get the targets by 2030 altogether in terms of emissions and temperature, so the 1.5 degree. But I would like to say that in particular in Oman, we had the Joint Council EU GCC October 10, few days after the October 7, and in Oman, we joined in the final statement, we agreed in the final statement, in the joint statement, EU, GCC, at the ministerial level, the ministers of foreign affairs were there. We agreed about important goals, in particular about renewables, about climate. And the collaboration about the renewables is focused on hydrogen, solar, and wind, obviously. But about hydrogen, it's very interesting because our main challenge as European Union is to help hydrogen to be on the market a more affordable energy, because now the point is the price. There are some question marks about the technologies, but about the price. European Union, according to Repower EU program, is going to import by 2030 10 million tons of hydrogen. The real challenge is to have, with reliable partners like Oman and the other countries of the GCC, first of all, a talk, an exploratory talk or a technical talk in terms of common standards for the hydrogen. This is the first point, because in order to set up the common standards, we have to speak, to talk, to have the opportunity at technical level to set up the standard of what it means for us and for them, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and this kind of debate. And so we will create a common standard, a common area where to work together for the import of 10 million tons of hydrogen, that this is our ambition by 2030. Second, we, as countries of the European Union, we have to face the challenge to regroup the demand of hydrogen, because this is very good in terms of predictability of the market. Because if we are able, we were not really able about gas, but about hydrogen, I think that we have an opportunity, because it's a new technology. About hydrogen is a new field collaboration with some countries. And I think that about that, we should start a real debate among, within the European Union, among the member states, in order to regroup the demand of hydrogen, giving a predictability on the market. And I think that we will be by 2030 the most important continent in terms of import of hydrogen. And so for the suppliers, will be very interesting to work with us with the predictability on the long term. Third, the infrastructures. It's very important, obviously, to invest in the infrastructures, and we need a huge alliance. And this is why I think that when at the margin of the G20 in India, Saudi Arabia, UAE, EU, with some member states, but in particular with the President of the Commission von der Leyen, and US signed this initiative of the IMEC, the Economic Corridor for data, goods and energy. It's very important to try to implement this corridor using the vehicle of hydrogen or in general the renewables. And who is underestimating the role of the GCC countries about the renewables is creating a big mistake, I think, even for our relations with them, because I just visited, for instance, in the UAE, the biggest solar power plant that was inaugurated with the ceremony at the margin of COP28. And it's only one of the examples of how these countries are investing in this sector. Finally, and I will close here, it's clear that the implementation of these kind of programs this kind of implementation needs a long-term vision. And this is why 2030 is very close in a way, but even 2040. So we need on the medium term to develop the common framework, technologies, the predictability and others. But we need a strong partnership and political partnership. And this is the wider mandate of the youth special representative, is to work about a lot of other sectors in order to elevate the level of the partnership with the GCC at the level that we deserve.
Thank you. So, Dr. Alif, you have a challenging job now because I would need you to also, you've been also to COP28. You've just got here from Dubai. And so I would need you to give us a sense of possibly what's going on there, but also can you focus a little bit more on the challenges? Because I think we have highlighted some opportunities, but we also have to be sort of quite open about the challenges and broader, from, the European perspective, but also the Gulf perspective, because there are different perspectives on both sides.
Well, thank you so much. Good morning. Selam alaikum. Merhaba. Uh, as a German-born, Istanbul-raised, and UK-educated climate change academic scientist, female voice, thank you so much for inviting me today. After COP28, this session is like a kiss of life. At least we know what we are talking right now, with one specific issue. As you highlighted, what is the main challenge? Of course, infrastructure and technology. So one of the fascinating pavilion during COP28, of course, it is not a coincidence, Siemens. I really, really enjoyed to visit. And I was I shared the panel with the CEO of Siemens at COP28. It was amazing. So during my research, PhD research, I had a chance to visit Patagonia. Siemens has a very big, actually, power plant. It is called Haru-Oni effect, e-fuels power plant. Maybe our esteemed speakers or guests, they had a chance to visit this power plant. So by the help of this power plant, it can expand 550 million liters e-fuel by 2030. So this power plant is producing e-fuel from wind and water. That's fascinating, really. And also Siemens has OmniWise artificial intelligence control system. So technology cooperation, as Excellency highlighted, is very important. And on the other hand, green jobs. Still, we need 55%, there's a 55% gap. Yes, after Ukraine war, like other European countries, Germany withdrew from this trade with Russia. Before Ukraine war, it was approximately 55% energy dependency, but now it is minimum 18% right now. It is thanks to the technologies. So the biggest challenge is technology. Another is, of course, jobs. And of course, third one is education. So that's why by the help of our NGO, the non-profit NGO, you are most welcome in the UK. I would love to host you. We are empowering less fortunate ladies, especially all around the world, to get education regarding sustainability, solar cookers. Maybe we are talking with European perspective, Gulf perspective, but in Africa, all around the region, there are lots of ladies who is suffering to get clean energy and clean water to cook soup for their kids. So this is one of the biggest challenge, actually. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have overall sort of highlighted some of the issues that have been at the core of this conversation between Europe and the Gulf monarchies on the energy transition. We have touched on the issue of common standards. And that is in itself, quite a big topic, because when we talk about common standards, for example, to give you a specific example, we say green hydrogen, which is the hydrogen that is produced thanks to electrolysis. Where do you get the water to produce that hydrogen. And most commonly in the Gulf region, the water is got through desalination. And then you open also questions from the European side sometimes. How is that desalination plant powered? Because if the desalination plant is powered through fossil fuels, then should we consider the green hydrogen completely green? And obviously, there are divergent opinions about that. And there are also, specifically in the Gulf countries, including in Oman, some last generation desalination plants that are either powered exclusively through solar panels, or are also implementing some again cutting edge technology that reduce the environmental impact of desalination plants. For example, treating brine, which is extremely saline disposal byproduct of desalination, in a way that becomes an industrial product. So that circular approach that is being tested out in the region. Circularity is something that Dr. Elif also mentioned. A circular approach to the carbon economy is also one potential way forward for to complement abatement technologies of sort of reducing the carbon emission impact of fossil fuels plant by reusing the CO2 that is captured at the production plant in different ways. And the European Union has, for example, a so-called innovation fund that funds a number of startups in Europe that have very innovative approach to reuse of the CO2. We touched on the huge challenge of infrastructure and export, what it means to really get the hydrogen to Europe. And for example, you might have to stop along the way. And that means also having an inclusive approach towards Africa, towards other countries of the Middle East and North Africa region, to get them involved as stopover on the route of export, and also let them host some of these infrastructure. We talked about creating a single market in the European Union. That's also something that is ongoing. The technology challenge, a point that is often raised is that on some of the lower level technologies, such as solar panels, China is actually much ahead of the European firms, specifically in the Gulf region. But then if you look at very high level technologies, for example, electrolyzers or other, sort of e-fuels production, then it's usually European firms that are sort of most sought after. I think, when we look at the whole sort of range of challenges, there are questions about how much should we invest into this transition as a credible alternative, and are we having the right approach to sort of manage this transition in an orderly way. For example, when we look at the so-called green jobs and the idea of you have to train a new workforce. I think, for example, in Oman, there has been a successful precedent with the traditional energy industry of, the big players from BP to Shell that already have implemented their sort of know-how and training programs. Do you think, Your Excellency, that you could build on the existing cooperation to expand towards the new sectors, the new energy, and that you can use that as a background to have more solid grounds into this very sort of futuristic sometimes venture?
Yeah. Now we've gone around a complete cycle from where is the water coming from, what do we do with the CO2, and of course, the upskilling of some of the critical jobs that we will need as we transition. Before I answer the last one, let me just address a few points that you've mentioned. I know it was not a question. But in terms of water, as part of the full certification process, water will be desalinated using green electricity. So the way we design the system, I said it's almost an island-like. So the electricity generated from renewable energy will be used to power the desalination plant. That water will be transported to the electrolyzers. It will need to be further desalinated, of course, to remove all the minerals because it needs to be ultra pure. And the resulting so-called reject water will then be used for a completely new economy we were not even considering at the time, which is vertical farming or mass area farming, because that water is available. It's for the developer, it's almost a problem. They have to get rid of it. For us, it's an opportunity. We can use it immediately. And the electricity available is green in the same location. So you pretty much get a completely new economy created out of nothing. And that's one of the realizations that we sort of got from the process that we adopted so far. Carbon is a different story. Yeah, so green hydrogen, blue hydrogen. We don't do much of blue hydrogen, but we do have a pilot coming. But green hydrogen got nothing to do with CO2. CO2, we have, of course, a number of initiatives ongoing. Number one, we identified where it's coming from. And there are 4 areas. Of course, industry is the biggest, electricity generation, mobility, and the oil and gas. These are the top culprits. 95% of the emission comes from there. 2 of them can be easily addressed by switching to renewable energy for power. And by 2030, our target is 30%. A few days ago, I was looking at the plans. We think we can be up to 31% from the activities that we will be executing over the next 2 years because you need time to build and so on. So I'm pretty comfortable we can meet that target. Our biggest challenge will be storage, and we're working with almost everybody who can spell the word storage on how can we store electricity, green electricity. We have local ideas. We need to have international ideas and so on. When we talked about the different sources of CO2 emission, of course, there is capture and sequestration. There is capture and usage. There is capture and mineralize, which is a unique form in Oman because we do have a formation that is capable of taking the CO2 once you infuse it in water, preferably seawater, and then pump it into this formation. It can almost mineralize it into rocks, and we have examples that actually demonstrate it is happening. Of course, Mother Nature does that all the time. We want to accelerate it. Mother Nature does it in thousands of years. We want to do it in months. And that's the technical challenge that we're facing. We're piloting one project as we speak. The last one, of course, is we need to reduce the CO2 emission in the first place. Anything you don't emit, you don't have to worry about. And that is happening by introducing green hydrogen into the existing industries. We start with the industries that consume hydrogen, the refineries, the fertilizer, ammonia facilities, and so methanol. They are consuming hydrogen. Some of the hard-to-abate industry, like steel, part of their process is also using hydrogen, and we are pushing toward lowering the cost of hydrogen, make it compatible or close to, from a cost point of view, to gas, and therefore the switch becomes more of a commercial as opposed to technical. Then we get into the difficult ones, like what do you do with cement, what do you do with other industries that can't manage, and so on. Mobility, we're starting already. We created an incentive for EVs or zero emission vehicles. Could be hydrogen, could be EVs. They are currently implemented. We are building not electrolyzers, but chargers left, right, and center. You can actually drive from one end of the country to the other end without worrying about getting a charger for your vehicle. So that is already in place in a span of about 1 year. And finally, to answer your question in terms of skills, of course, we're building on the existing skills from the oil and gas. The skills that we need for the renewable energy hydrogen is pretty much, to a large extent, are the same. So you need electricians, you need mechanics, you need instrument engineers, but you need one new skill that is not currently available with oil and gas, not in big number, which is data scientists. We need those guys badly, and we need to start training them. And of course, system managers in terms of how do you distribute the power because it's going to be intermittent and so on. So these are some of the unique skills that we need to build, but the standard skills are already in place. We just need to probably polish them and make sure that they are meeting the requirement of the renewable energy, predominantly electricians, senior electricians, mechanic, instruments. These are the ones that will be in high demand. If you ask me what is my biggest challenge,
Yeah.
not these ones. My biggest challenge is the construction community and the supply chain of all the equipments. That's the biggest challenge I'm facing now.
Yes, and thank you for raising the point about water in a very comprehensive way, and also mentioning the mineralization, the CO2 mineralization project, which is quite unique in Oman and seems to be giving very useful results. So I would like, I mean, you've given me some inspiration for a number of questions, but actually I would like to focus on a more political level question to His Excellency Di Maio. You've also just been in the UAE, and I think could you give us a little bit of a sense of the political environment, the political mood, especially between the Europeans and the Gulf counterparts?
I think that the GCC countries in particular and the EU are closer than before, in particular in this COP, that it shows even the important role of this region, because the presidency is from UAE, and Dr. Sultan, the president of COP, was in Brussels during the summer and even recently. He joined even the FAC. He had the opportunity to have a dialogue with our ministers recently, just before the COP. And yes, there are different opinions on some points, but these countries are closer to Europe than a few years ago. This is why they are investing a lot in diversification. And if you look at our programs and their vision programs, there are a lot of similar projects where we can work together more and more. Because I think that there are three levels of collaboration. The first is the bilateral one, and our role as European Union, and if I may, as governments, is to create a good business environment in order to give the opportunity to our company to work better in a better business environment, in a more feasible and conducive environment in order to deal about renewables, even about other kind of sectors of the economy. And this it comes to, when we speak about that, it comes to trade negotiations, regulatory framework negotiations, and others. The second level is the triangular cooperation. You mentioned Africa. The electrification of the African continent is a big challenge, and is a big challenge according to our program, Global Gateway, that is a huge program of the European Commission and European member states in order to support infrastructures in continents like Africa, and is in the programs of the GCC countries. And even sometimes we hear from the Secretary General of the GCC regional organization this kind of goals as a sort of synthesis of what they want to do with Africa. So again, in the framework of our common programs, we should work more, joining projects for third countries or other continents, mainly Africa, where we already have strongly connections, strong investments with them in development cooperation and economic investments. And the third one is about the general diversification, because you mentioned the dependency on some kind of technologies for the renewables. Yes, but it is the dependency on raw materials. And about raw materials, we have His Excellency here, that is Minister of Energy and Minerals, like some other his counterparts in the region that are in charge for the incredible amount of mineral resources that they have. And this it comes to the diversification issue that we are facing, in particular after the COVID and after the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Obviously, we have sometimes different opinions about how much fast has to be this transition. This is a point, but in any case, everyone recognized that the transition needs a period in order to achieve some goals. But our common goals are in the Paris Agreement, and the Paris Agreement is pushing on all of us in order to achieve the goals. And this is the environment, the sentiment that I felt in Dubai during the COP28, where everyone is trying to do the best and is trying to put on the table the best solution in order to advance on the climate negotiations.
Thank you. Dr. Alif, I want to pose to you the issue that His Excellency Laoufi and His Excellency Di Maio both raised, which is the supply chain issue. That's obviously, it's very broad because it has to do with a lot of different materials. But it also has to do specifically with the critical raw materials that are essential in the transition. And they've mentioned already, we've seen two shocks to supply chain. Recently, COVID, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're seeing now, tensions growing between the US and China on this issue with, reciprocal export control measures. Do you think that there is sort of there could be an approach to tackle these issues?
Yes, excellent question. Thank you so much. I was expecting that question. Of course, at the end of the day, money talks. So that's why the biggest amazing revolution in terms of the topic that you highlighted, uh, Inflation Reduction Act, so taxation of Biden's governments. So I think, for example, if you order Uber in London, for example, by the way, Uber was the first company yesterday who welcomed me in Doha before Vodafone. It was so cheeky. So if you order Uber in the UK, in London, it will arrive very quickly. And for the green, eco-friendly Uber, there is a 50% tax off. That's amazing. As an individual, I really, really enjoy this. So let's think what will happen if, company from Paris or Germany or from Oman launch a new facility in United States and automatically 50% off by the help of this Inflation Reduction Act. This is fantastic, amazing. So I think by the help of this taxation issue, we can sort it out, the point you highlighted. And supply chain also needs another perspective because it is very, very, very holistic issue. Social justice, because yes, we are enjoying electrical vehicles and for the zero emissions, for the net zero target 2050 by 2050. But on the other hand, we know that it is not a rocket science. Those tires are getting tired very quickly. So they have been burned in the third world countries like some of the African countries, unfortunately. So is this a social justice of supply chain? Of course not. So Inflation Reduction Act and also social justice will sort it out supply chain issue.
Thanks. So we have approximately 4 minutes. If there is maybe two questions from the audience, we could take them. Don't be shy. All right. Over there. Can you, take the microphone off to the lady?
Thank you for the interesting discussion. I'm Gabir Mahnadi, an assistant professor in chemical engineering, Texas A&M University at Qatar. I'm really interested in the area of the energy transition and very thankful to be listening to your talk. Recently, I just came back from COP28. Hydrogen was a big topic, especially also in green financing. So we know from the history of Qatar, the LNG example was very successful, where you had the integrated processing, shipping, and then the regasification stations whenever we have a big deal. So in terms of hydrogen, it requires investment from both sides. So is there any plans of thinking of financing or long-term plans to do those infrastructure in place to enable the hydrogen economy? And my second question is blue hydrogen seems to be a very good technology since this region, the GCC especially, has a lot of reservoirs that can act as carbon capture. So you can have a low intensity or low carbon footprint hydrogen. So is also an interest in that, or is it more on green focus? Thank you.
Very good questions. And then we have a second and a third one in the front, and fourth one, but only if you're very, very brief, because otherwise we won't have time to respond. Please.
Thank you very much. Remy Pierre, Professor at HEC Paris in Qatar. Specifically regarding Oman and the relationship with the European Union, when you look at the battery metal sector and see a lot of different investment as an elements, for example, from OIA and others, Saudi Arabia is doing the same thing. The European Union has different strategy in terms of critical minerals. What we can see in terms of investment you would have specifically in Oman on this, and what is the collaboration you have in terms of joint partnership between the EU and the GCC on this question? Thank you.
Thank you. Over to your.
Thank you. Doyle Khatib, former Energy Minister from Iraq. My question is very much, may sound a bit primitive. How can we weigh or check the balance between energy transition and energy security and economic security? We've heard, for example, Justin Trudeau 7 years ago when he said that we didn't find 173 billion barrel in the ground just to leave them there. We ought to develop them and sustainably and with the right policy. But eventually, we'll be using fossil fuel. Also, the major resource holders are very much the economy is dependent on the fossil fuel. So the focus, I would suggest, should be like on the use of technology. Blaming the oil industry for the CO2 emission is like blaming sugar canes and wheat farmers for obesity. That's all down to the consumers.
Yeah.
The very audience and the plenary session here, wearing and using clothes all produced by the derivative of fossil fuel. So how long that will take, and I personally, my humble opinion, we need to act sensibly, not to compromise the economic and energy security of many countries as we move into the energy transition.
Thank you. There is one last question over there, but I've asked you to be brief. Could you pass the microphone to your left, please?
Hi, I'm Shaylis Kuru from the UK. I'll make it pretty quick. I slightly beg to differ with regard to illustration around the tires being burnt out. I know there's a lot of recycling initiatives in Africa that actually sort of cater for that. However, you've mentioned the concept of the COP28 you were involved in and the whole Paris Agreement and so on and so forth. And I'm really keen to see or hear your perspectives around some of the policies we have today and how this pushes for a better tomorrow, particularly with Africa. What initiatives do we have and how can we sort of be more aligned to the longer term vision rather than shorter term personal gains? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very important point. So I will distribute the questions. I'll use that prerogative as a moderator. Your Excellency, would you like to tackle the question on blue hydrogen?
I was actually going to go through them very quickly, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, of course.
Because the first one, she talked about the infrastructure requirement, and I see the infrastructure on both sides. We are working very hard to try and build the infrastructure to produce the hydrogen, to liquefy the hydrogen, or convert it to another derivative so that it can be exported. And if it is liquefied, which is minus 260 degrees, then we're also working with credible partners to identify and design the kind of ships that will transport it to destination. And we're also working with receiving ports on the dehydrogenization, sort of, that's a new word we have to learn, also facilities. So the entire infrastructure we are mapping because we know that we cannot do it on one side only. It has to be an entire supply chain. So that we're working on very, very fast with credible partners. Blue hydrogen, as I said, we pilot. Uh, for Oman, I don't see it as a major business because it consumes the limited gas resources that we have. And I already have an LNG business that still has many, many years of headroom. So we will try to play with it just to understand what it means. We have the sequestration sinks. We studied the grounds. We've been producing oil and gas for the last 50 years. We know exactly where we can sequester if we need to. And the infrastructure of transporting CO2 is currently being discussed. Collaboration with the European Union, all the projects that I mentioned, including the ones that will come, it is all done through consortiums. It's an open system. European companies have already participated. Some of them have won. In fact, Copenhagen Investment Fund is one of them. NG is another one. Some of the other companies, of course, Japanese, we will sign next week, in fact, with Marbini, and so on. So all the projects are done through open system, full collaboration, but we don't sort of direct the investment toward a specific investor. We allow the market to dictate who the partners are. We do our due diligence to really control the quality of the partners and the credibility of the partners. And the last one I would like to just add to this point, which is I totally agree. And I think we need to shift the attention from reducing or phasing out hydrocarbon toward managing the CO2 that comes with it. We need hydrocarbon. Yeah, we need this. Unless we find a solution to produce these kind of things from non-hydrocarbon, we need it. Our responsibility is to produce hydrocarbon as clean as it can get. And we also are responsible to make sure that when we use the hydrocarbon, the CO2 is collected and managed to fight the production of fossil fuel. At this moment in time, I think it's a losing battle and no one is going to win it. So we need to come to reality very quickly.
Yeah, thank you. Your Excellency, would you like to take the one on energy security versus transition or the one on Africa?
I think that it's the real point of about the discussion in COP, but in every COP, in particular after Paris, because it's clear that now we have some goals, but there are even some disruptive events that happened between Paris and today. We mentioned Russian aggression against Ukraine. We mentioned COVID that sometimes accelerated some types of processes and slowed down others. So my opinion is that it's clear that we have to avoid shock. We have to avoid risks for the security, the countries and in general of entire regions, but without to try to find the excuse. Because I think that the goals about we agreed in Paris during the COP of Paris are goals about we agreed all together. And the credibility of the international community about the climate goals is our main priority, in particular for the next generations. Then I think that even the important initiative of a fund for loss and damages that was announced at the COP28, it's an important initiative of a part of the world that is ready to help in the transition and even in particular to face the effects of the climate change for another part of the world that has not all the instruments in order to face this transition. I would like to say even that it's very important the nexus between climate and security, because it's sometimes even a confidence building measure, because sometimes even countries that are, I use a terrible word, even countries that are enemies, they have a common enemy that sometimes are the effects of the climate change. And even in this region, I'm hearing a lot, for instance, the phenomenon of the sandstorms that is increasing a lot. and how to work together in order to face the effects of the climate change, the transformation of the environment because of the climate change. So sometimes the nexus between climate and security could be even a confidence building measure in order to promote a dialogue among countries that are in competition or sometimes are even polarized for regional issues.
Thank you very much. Dr. Alif, I will ask you to excuse us, but we really got carried away in the conversation. So I think we will have to end it here. Also because we wouldn't make justice to your question, because we can't relegate, the sort of the right approach to transition in the African continent in a couple of seconds. It would be unfair to the subject. But I can tell you that it is a subject on everybody's agenda, and then we will definitely have more opportunities to talk about it, even at the Doha Forum. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And now enjoy your break. Thank you to the panelists for their excellent contributions, and we will resume the program shortly.